Hello and welcome to another Moog demo library. In today's video, we're going to be exploring Muse, and specifically we're going to focus in on some of the new firmware features added in the 1.4 update. Now, a big user-requested feature was the ability to modulate the various parameters of the diffusion delay, and this is now possible with the 1.4 firmware update because we've added some new global modulation sources. Now, in every previous firmware, the way Muses worked is that each timbre has its own mod sources. So the 3 LFOs, the mod oscillator, the 2 envelopes, and then the 16 random trigs and the mod map all operate within their timbre, and each timbre has its own set. In the 1.4 firmware, what we've done is added 2 new global LFOs, 2 new global ADSRs, and they operate actually monophonically using multi-trig behavior, and then 2 new global random trigs. And when I say global, what that means is that each timbre has access to them. So I could use a single LFO, for instance, to modulate the cutoff of filter 2 so that on timbre A it modulates it upwards, while on timbre B it modulates it downwards, or any number of interesting sound design options that can get particularly interesting when you're using the stack or split modes. Now, the other advantage to the global mod sources is that, of course, we can now modulate all of the parameters of the delay, and we can even break apart the various character settings that the character knob can control. And so to do this, we're going to look at the mod map, and we can see that there is a new soft button that says Gmod Edit. Now, when I engage this, you'll notice that the More menu buttons for LFO 1 and 2, the assignable controllers, and both envelopes are slowly pulsing. So this indicates that we're now editing the global counterpart for each of these sections, and if we were to adjust, say, the attack for the VCA envelope while its More menu is pulsing, we'd instead be adjusting the attack for global envelope 2. Or if we were to change the rate for LFO 1, we'd be changing the rate for global LFO 1. You can also enter and exit the global modulation editing mode in the More menu for any mod source that has a global counterpart. So for instance, if I were to exit the global mod editing mode, you could see that I'm just looking at the More menu for LFO 1, but if I hit Gmod Edit, I'll be looking at the More menu for global LFO 1. So this way you can use the panel controls to change the settings for all of the global mod sources as if they were the same as the timbre settings. And the More menus will match for the most part, except in the case of the LFOs, we obviously can't set it to per timbre because it's a global source. Now, if we wanted to use one of these to modulate one of the settings on the delay, we can actually do that by scrolling over to the destination box for mod slot 1. I'm going to click the select encoder so that the text here is blinking, and then I'm going to turn the delay times right knob. Now, if I were to scroll one further, I'll get to this destination called D-time linked, and that means that I'm going to modulate the delay times for both the left and right side at the same time and the same amount. Now, once I have a global modulation destination selected, you'll notice that the source list gets restricted, so I can only look at the global mod sources. But if I scroll through that list, then I'll come up on global LFO 1. You'll see that we can make it either unipolar or bipolar within each mod slot. And then we can also get to the global envelopes and the global random trigs. Now, one important thing to note for the global random trigs is that by default, the first random trig is triggered by timbre A, and then the second one is triggered by timbre B. But if we look at the assignable controllers More menu and we scroll down to the bottom, we can see that we can actually select the source within the menu. So for this example, I'm just going to set them both to be triggered by source A. Now I'm going to go ahead and assign timbre A to the delay. I'm going to turn the mix up. I'm going to increase my stereo spread to about noon. I also want to turn my cutoff down a little bit and make something that sounds kind of plucky. So let's hear how that sounds. So we can hear that we are getting a nice delay out of Muse, and now let's hear how it sounds as we use the global LFO 1 to modulate the delay time. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it up, and let's give it a listen. So as you can hear, we're getting this interesting stuttered, almost suspended sound in the delay, and that's actually because we have the delay currently operating crossfade mode. So as the delay time is getting modulated, it's just crossfading through all of these different delay taps. But if we turn that to pitch shift mode, you'll hear that it sounds quite different. And let's turn the delay times up and maybe sync them a little bit, make them jump between sync divisions. So as you can hear, we can get some really interesting sounds. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and just flip it back into crossfade mode and get this interesting kind of suspended sound. And then I'm going to go back into the mod map, and I'm going to go into slot 2, and now I'm going to select the global LFO 2 as my source. You'll also notice that when I hit the assign buttons while the more menu buttons are pulsing, we are going to be able to assign global LFO 2, versus if I were to turn global mod edit off and then hit the assign button again, you can see I get LFO 2 for timbre A. But while I have global modulation edit mode on, I can hit the assign button and then I can assign a global LFO 2. So now I'm going to select the character knob, and you can see that by default when I turn that knob, the first parameter that comes up is the diffusion amount. But for now I'm going to keep scrolling to the delay cutoff. Now, right now the character knob is set to control via a DJ style filter the cutoff of the wet output, so I can high pass it or I can low pass it. But I actually want global LFO 2 to modulate that, so sometimes it high passes and sometimes it low passes it. So let's turn up that modulation amount. And I'm actually going to set global LFO 2 to be one of the user waveforms, and I'm going to go into its more menu, and I'm going to select the user waveform called seasick. And now you can hear I get this interesting filter movement on the wet signal out of the delay. Now, if we want to keep pushing this further, I'll go into mod slot 3. And this time I'm going to, again, assign global LFO 2, but I'm just doing that to jump the list, and I'm going to keep scrolling until I get to global random trig 1. I'm going to set its destination to diffusion amount, and I'm going to turn that up to around 50%. I'm also going to go into the more menu for the diffusion delay and scroll down till I hit the diffusion time, and I'm going to turn that down a little bit to somewhere around a second. So now what's going to happen is that every time I press a note, it's randomly going to set the diffusion amount and the delay to a different amount. So some of my notes will be diffused, some of them won't, and I'll get this interesting changing behavior out of the delay. I'll add a little bit of vibrato to the patch. And I can keep pushing this concept further. So let's say I go back and assign global LFO 1 again. But this time I'm going to assign it to the mix for the delay. And just gently have it modulate so that sometimes we're getting more of the delay signal, sometimes we're getting more of the dry signal. if we were to say make something a little bit more like a pad, like a long pad sound. And another thing that we could do, for instance, is go back into a new mod slot and assign aftertouch to control the feedback for the delay. So now I can increase the feedback when I play a chord just by pressing down on the key a little harder. So as you can see, the 1.4 firmware update opens a lot of new modulation possibilities that can get extremely interesting, and we're just barely scratching the surface because we haven't incorporated in any of the per timbre mod sources. So you can achieve some really complex patches and sound design with some of these new global mod sources.